cloud. All right, I'm getting there. Okay, so 2-1 is all about these things called conditional statements. All right. Get this lined up here. Okay, good. So 2-1, conditional statements. Thank you. Zoom out a bit. Whoops. Went in instead of out. Yes. So there's one attached to the cabinet on the other side or on the wall right there under the lights. One of those should work. All right, everybody, conditional statements. You use them all the time. You just may not realize that we call them conditional statements. There are any statements that, go ahead. Better?
Yeah.
Any statement that can be set up in the form of if something, then something else. So for example, if today is Tuesday, then we're having tacos. Okay, if a number is even, then it is divisible by 2. If a shape has 4 sides, then it is a quadrilateral. So any of those would count as a conditional statement where we are setting up some condition, right? And then something's going to happen based on that. Conditionals could be true or false, right? I'm not worried about whether it's a true statement or a false statement just yet. So right now we're just going to look at what a conditional even is. All right, so let's jot down that conditional statement. We refer to them as if-then statements. So for example, if you're 18, then you can vote. Any statement such as this, it doesn't have to have the words if and then to be considered a conditional statement. But it should be a statement that I could rephrase in an if-then form. So for example, if I said the same thing, if I said 18-year-olds are allowed to vote, that's still a conditional statement, even though it didn't literally have the words if and then. We like when it has the words if and then in it because it sort of breaks it up really nicely for us to be able to see the next 2 pieces that we're looking at. So every one of these conditional statements has 2 parts. We call them the hypothesis and the conclusion. So, hypothesis. This is going to be the portion of a conditional that typically follows the word if. We love using symbols for things. So we don't have to write as much. Okay, so symbolically, symbol used is the letter P, a lowercase letter P. Why is it P? I have no idea, honestly. But they use P to represent the hypothesis portion of a conditional statement. Okay, let me give you the second part and then we'll practice identifying the two pieces in several sentences. Okay, so next up is our friend. The second part is called the conclusion. Okay, so the conclusion is just the chunk of the sentence that follows the word then, and its symbol want to guess what letter? Q of all letters, right? A lowercase q. Q. Why? I don't know. But we have P and Q. All righty, so let's give an example and then we'll identify hypothesis and conclusion. All right, so let's do, I don't know, let's do a math one. If a shape is a triangle, oh, thank you. Triangle, then it has 3 sides. Okay, if a shape is a triangle, then it has 3 sides. So that is a conditional statement. It is very nicely set up in the if-then form. So if I ask you to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion, Riley, go ahead. That's pretty much it. The only thing I'm going to say is you don't actually include the words if and then, just the chunk that comes after. So we would say a shape is a triangle. That's my hypothesis. Or you can just use the letter P. And then it has 3 sides is simply the conclusion. Or Q. All right. I'm going to see if I can trick you with this one. Let's do you can go if you clean your room. So this still is a conditional statement. It's just not set up in an if-then form. I don't have if this, then that. I do have an if in here though. I don't have a then, but that's okay. Anyone care to venture a guess at what the hypothesis would be this time? Riley, go for it. Correct. So the hypothesis does not have to come first in a sentence. It follows, if I have the word if, it's whatever comes after it. So this is still my hypothesis. My conclusion is still back here. You can go. If you don't like this, you can always, if you don't like when it's like out of order like this, you can always take the time to rewrite the sentence. Have I changed the meaning at all? If I rewrote it as if you clean your room, then you can go. That means the exact same thing as you can go if you clean your room. There's no changing of the meaning there. So if you prefer to always have a conditional set up in if-then form, you can make that happen. You don't have to, but if you feel better, do it. All right. I think we're good with that. Oh, let me show you what it kind of looks like symbolically too. So for a conditional statement, let's talk about the P and Q and how the symbols kind of work. So a conditional, we have the hypothesis and then we have a conclusion. So this is how we can write it symbolically. P with an arrow to a Q. And this, if you were to say that out loud, we would say that as if P, then Q. Which is kind of weird, but that's like our shorthand for, hey, here's a conditional. Take whatever the hypothesis is, pop it in for P, take whatever the conclusion is, pop it in for Q. Good. And is it still P and Q? Or
no.
You just
put whatever variable we want for it, and then let me use the if statement. We put the Boolean variable in. Our P or Q will be.
oh, perfect. All right. So I already told you that the hypothesis is P, the conclusion is Q. All right. We're going to switch it up a little bit. Literally, what if I took a statement and like this one, if a shape is a triangle, then it has 3 sides. If I swap that sentence around and I said, if a shape has 3 sides, then it is a triangle. Okay, that's a new statement now. And it may be true, it may be false. Actually, let me do one with cities. If you live in Boston, then you live in Massachusetts. True statement, right? If you live in Boston, you do live in Massachusetts, correct? If I took that same statement and I swapped it around, if you live in Massachusetts, then you live in Boston. Not true anymore, right? So an original statement could be true, it could be false. And then when we switch it, maybe now it's true or maybe now it's false. It doesn't matter. There is when we swap it around, we have a name for that. So let me go on to the next page. That is called the converse of a statement, just like the sneaker brand. Converse. Converse. When the hypothesis and conclusion are swapped. So let me give you those examples I just did. I said, so the original, I said, if you live in Boston, then you live in Mass. There we go. So there is an original conditional statement. I have an if P then Q going on here. What is the hypothesis here? You live in Boston. So there is my hypothesis. And so naturally my conclusion would be you live in Massachusetts. This happens to be a true statement as it is. And as we've already discussed, when I swap it, when I take the converse of this conditional statement, I now end up with a false statement, but it doesn't matter. Okay, we're just looking at this, the sentence structure. If you swap the two, you can create a new statement called the converse. So the converse symbolically, since I'm swapping these two, I would do if Q then P. And so now it would read, if you live in Mass, then you live in Boston. you'll hear us sometimes talk about truth statement or truth value, and that's just if a statement is true or false. So our original was true, and we all know that the converse is false. So slide this up a little bit. Truth value is whether a statement is true or false. Okay, so in this example, I can write the converse. The converse is false. It's a false statement. And how do you know it's a false statement? Because you can provide what's called a counterexample. A counterexample is any example that proves a statement false. So every single one of this, oh, I take that back. Do any of you live in Connecticut? Probably not, right? Even if you school choice, I don't know if you can school choice across state lines. Can you?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I'd be surprised. So all of us live in Massachusetts, I assume. But none of us live in Boston, correct? So every single one of us is actually a counterexample. I could say, hey, I live in Massachusetts, but I don't live in Boston. So I would count as a counterexample. All you would need is one. Okay, but we have literally millions. If I said something like, all birds can fly, you could provide a counterexample to that statement, couldn't you? Give me a bird that can't fly. Ostrich. I heard penguin. You could have a bird with a broken wing. Still a bird, it just can't fly right now. So a counterexample, we use those a lot. If there are, and all you need is one. Watch this. All prime numbers are odd. Two is that's the only counterexample to that statement because it is the only prime number that is even, but it's there, right? All I need is one to make a whole statement can't be true if I have at least one counterexample. Okay, so let's get that down. Counterexample. And we're almost done. I just have one more thing to talk about after counterexample. Counterexample. Any example that proves a statement false. So if I say all birds can fly, a counterexample, and there's tons of them. You can pick any one you like. I'm going to go with penguins because they're so darn cute. Okay, and then we have one last thing to talk about, and these are biconditionals. Biconditionals. So this is a statement that we join the hypothesis and conclusion together using the words if and only if. So I'm going to write it this way. P, if and only if. Q. So let me give you an example of a true one because you can make plenty of false ones. Let's do a shape is a triangle if and only if it has three sides. That is a true biconditional. And the way that I know that it's true is because I can check its truth value going both ways. So a shape is a triangle if it has three sides. That's true. And if I go the other way, if a shape has three sides, is it a triangle? Yes. If I tried to do the same thing with a square, let's say, if I said a square is a shape that has four sides, that's true, but go the other way. If a shape has four sides, is it a square? No. So if I tried to join them together in a biconditional, I could do it. It would just be a false one because it's not true that a shape is a square if and only if it has four sides. That's not true because I have plenty of four-sided figures that are not squares. Okay, this one's true though because it's true forwards and backwards. The only shape that has three sides is a triangle. And if it has three sides, it's got to be a triangle. So I can work both ways. So that's going to be true forwards and backwards. Symbolically, biconditionals, because you can go forwards and backwards, they look like this. They have a double-headed arrow between the P and the Q. Also, I'd be remiss if I did not mention another lazy shortcut that we have. Sometimes we get tired of writing out if and only if. So there's a shortcut. We can literally use if with two F's. And that's like our shorthand way of writing if and only if. So if you ever see that, it's not a typo, it's a lazy hack, I guess. All right, and that is it for 2-1. I know you're probably like, why? This is so strange. Why are we doing all this wordy stuff, breaking down sentences and talking about this in geometry? Because so many, and I keep throwing in examples of shapes, so many of our definitions come to us as conditionals. Even lines. If lines are parallel, then they never intersect. If lines never intersect, are they parallel? Or could you give me a counterexample? Skew lines would be the counterexample. You see that? So we are actually going to be dealing with conditional statements a ton. So it's important to understand kind of how they work. All right. Does anybody have any questions right now? Okay, so I do have a worksheet for you to work on. I don't mind if you work together. If you want to work by yourself, that's fine too. Whatever you want. So let me hand this out to you. I'll give you, I don't know, 15-ish minutes. We'll see where we're at. I'll just stop this recording.